Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Infrastructure Investment and Inclusive Growth Scrutiny Board this morning. My name's Councillor Hannah Bithell, and I will be chairing today. Just want to remind all attendees that the meeting is being webcast, and we can view the meeting. If you would like to rewatch your performance, we can rewatch the meeting via the meeting webpage. For the benefit of any members of the public watching the webcast, I'm going to ask members of the Scrutiny Board to introduce themselves first, and officers and guests will introduce as we get to your item. Please turn off your microphone when you're done.
Good morning, Councillor Andrew Scotes, Beeson Holbeck.
Morning, everybody. Katie Dye, Councillor for Killingbeck and Seacroft.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Sonia Layton, Guiseley and Rawdon Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Mohammed Shazad, Motown and Meanwood Ward.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Karen Bruce, Councillor for Ardsley and Robin Hood Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Tim Goodall, Councillor for Headingley and Hyde Park.
Good morning, Councillor Neil Buckley, Old Woodley Ward.
Hello, Ryan Stevenson, Councillor for Harewood Ward.
Hello, Becky Atherton, Scrutiny Advisor to the Board.
Thank you, everyone. We'll go now through items 1 to 5, please, Becky.
Thank you, Chair. Item 1, we've got no appeals today. Item 2, we've got no items that are excluded from the public domain. Item 3, we have no late items. Item 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask members to disclose any interests in accordance with the Council's Code of Conduct? I will take silence as none. And then item 5, apologies. We've had apologies from Councillor Chapman, who's unfortunately not very well, and also Councillor Matthew Robinson. Councillor Ryan Stevenson's attending as a substitute today.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the minutes. Can I have somebody to propose they are a correct record of the meeting held on the 24th of February? Thank you, Karen. And a seconder? Thank you, Shazad. Okay, we've had an agreement in the pre-meeting to take the work schedule, which is item number 7, later on in the meeting. So we'll move straight to item number 8, which is 100% digital inclusion update. We have three guests joining us today, 2 officers and an external guest. So if I can ask you to introduce yourselves first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jason Tootin, Head of 100% Digital Leeds, based in the Integrated Digital Service in the Council.
Morning, everyone. I'm Amy Hearn, Digital Inclusion Manager on Jason's team.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bumi Owolabi, CEO, Africanus. We are a charity organisation based in Leeds. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're really, really delighted to have you here with us today. Thank you so much for giving up your time. So this is an annual report on the work of 100% Digital Leeds. Those of you that follow our Scrutiny Board closely will know that we had it last year as well, and I've done for several years before that. Last year, we specifically asked for disinformation to be included in the work of 100% Digital this year. And I'm really, really pleased that that has been reflected, and hopefully you'll be able to see in the papers the level of reflection on the projects that have taken place. And having Africanus to today's meeting is really beautiful. It's one of the 5 VCSE organisations that have been delivering the Connecting and Protecting Communities project, which is vastly based on the work that we requested last year. We'll be able to provide insight into the impact of this work and, of course, the communities that you support. In Chair's brief, officers and I reflected on the key barriers to digital engagement today that I think it would be useful to bear in mind throughout the discussions. So there is the skills, the connectivity, the confidence, and also the motivation. Now, many of those overlap each other, but I think the information in the pack shows some of the different examples of where they're at play. And we'll begin with a brief presentation. Those of you, again, that keep track of our board know I like a very short presentation. we have a relatively long presentation today, so I'm going to give you a time limit of 5 minutes anyway. So you're going to have to click quick. Okay? Thank you.
Can I just clarify 5 minutes for the entire thing, Councillor? No, for the presentation. Okay. Next slide then, please. Sorry, yeah, thank you. Okay, so just a reminder about 100% Digital Leeds approach. So we position digital inclusion as an enabler to wider aims and objectives to do with those that individuals in the community may have around things like health, employability, financial resilience, etc., and the aims and objectives of the organisations that we partner with that deliver digital inclusion interventions. We want everybody to be able to make best use of digital for what they would like to do. In order to do that, we need to remove the barriers that Councillor Bithell mentioned. So our approach is community-based and strengths-based. So we work with delivery partners that work with and in communities that experience digital exclusion or are more likely to experience it. And we work with those organisations to build on their assets, their trusted relationship with people, to make sure that they understand what their role in digital inclusion, and then provide them the resources, the tools, the skills, the understanding, the partnerships, etc., to be able to develop and deliver a bespoke digital inclusion intervention designed to meet the needs of the people and communities they support. We've worked with around 230 organisations in this calendar year, this financial year, to one extent or another, and this is just a map of where the Leeds-based ones are to demonstrate the scale of our work. So this is the support that we offer. So as I said, we work with organisations, we work with them to understand what digital inclusion can look like, to understand where there are issues and challenges that are faced by multiple organisations, to often bring those together, to work in partnership and look at how we can be strategic at overcoming those barriers. One of the ways that we do that, next slide please, is by some of the things that we've discussed in our report. So this is a headline of the different things that Jason has chosen to highlight in the report, which is just a selection of our work. For the rest of this presentation, we're going to focus on the connecting and protecting, which is the work around mis and disinformation. But first, I just wanted to mention, as an example, as Councillor Bithell said, there's different barriers all intersect and exacerbate each other. So one of the things that we do is work with partners, often on a national scale, to bring resource into the city to be able to help organisations overcome those partners. And those barriers, sorry. One example of that is a partnership with Jangala, who provide get boxes, which are plug-in and go Wi-Fi solutions that can be long-term loaned to individuals, providing 12 months of free connectivity. So we've worked with Jangala to bring 450 get boxes into the city. As Liz at Jangala there in the quote notes, that's nearly 1 in 10 of all of the boxes that have gone out in the UK. And that's partly because of our ability to be able to work with Jangala to effectively and efficiently distribute their resource in a way that helps them realise their outcomes. We've worked with 30 organisations to distribute those 450 get boxes. That's brought a value just for the get boxes alone. Realise I've not calculated in the data, which would be about an extra £50 per box per month, per year, I think, and it comes to over £100,000. Next slide, please. Thank you. So connecting and protecting communities is the objective was to bring partners together to co-produce a bank of resources that organisations can use to help upskill people in how to identify and not fall victim to mis and disinformation in all its forms. Some of these forms are around challenging minority beliefs, around making sure that people don't fall victim to scams, around challenging health misinformation that leads to people not engaging with different health interventions, and to generally build confidence for people to feel safer and more confident when using the internet, which we know is a barrier to people engaging overall. So in terms of outcomes for organisations, it's to give a toolkit that any organisation can pick up to look at how they can, in the same way that we work in a strengths-based and tailored way, to be able to tailor their approach, messaging, to be able to teach the key skills that people need to be able to not fall victim, so that communities can be safer, basically. So we worked with 5 organisations that you can see on the list there. Each of those organisations was given a brief around the skills that we wanted people to end up with, and then they were allowed and supported, not left, to approach that in whatever way they saw fit, based on what they know about the needs and what will resonate with their particular audiences. Some of these organisations we've worked with in the past because they have fed into similar pieces of work that we've done, like Be Online Stay Safe, which we reported on last year, and Multiply, which we reported on this year, which which you know have involved tailoring basically. And you can see some of the barriers here. So Damask, the charity based at Ewell Gardens Community Centre that's run by a Syrian couple that have seen that language and the need for translation has been a barrier to people being able to identify mis and disinformation. And then a further example from Leeds Irish Health and Homes, demonstrating that mis and disinformation we've seen is not always just around online and digital online safety. They've been able to challenge mis and disinformation that's found from wider sources using digital as a tool for verification, etc. And now I'm going to hand it over to Bunmi.
Right. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share the work that we did within our communities. Africanness exists to support children and young people from diverse communities, specifically from African communities. And one of the key pain points that we have is a lot of parents first and foremost lose interest in the systems, especially in services that we provide. We have children and young people who have issues around identity and sense of belonging. And we have a lot of service providers who struggle to communicate with communities, especially communities from racially minoritized areas. And that's where we come in as an organization. We come in as an organization to bridge that gap, to really support communities, support parents, support children from these communities, address challenges around racial bullying, identity crisis that a lot of our children do face in the community. And we also provide the required tools and resources for parents to be able to nurture and support their children effectively. And beyond that, we also work with services. So we collaborate and partner with service organizations to ensure that a lot of these challenges are fully addressed. And one of the key pain points for us, obviously, is the impact that it has on children when children are racially bullied or when they have identity crisis. Impact is on their mental well-being, is on their education. It affects parents in all ramifications, and it affects how we prepare these children for the future. So that is the work that we do. So when this project came to us, it is very key for us because one of the key areas that we try to address is on safeguarding concerns. And we all know the challenges with our social workers at the moment, struggling to really support families from diverse communities. So we've seen over time, over the past 3 years, that one of the main challenges when it comes to safeguarding children has got to do with digital online platforms as well, especially for parents who have barriers like language barriers, have issues with the digital system. We have parents that don't even know how to switch on a laptop, for instance, and they have teenagers who go to school, come home with homeworks, and some of them, we've worked with some children who, when we require consent from parents, we end up requesting the consent from children to interpret what it is to their parents so that we can get the consent. That's the day-to-day challenges that we face. So when this came to us, we took it wholeheartedly because we know, yes, this is an opportunity for us to be able to make impact in our communities. So what was our approach? First and foremost, we looked at the big technical terms here. We're talking about disinformation and misinformation. So the first question is, how do we break that down to our community? Majority of the parents we work with don't speak English as their first language. How do you break phishing, disinformation, misinformation? How do you break that as simple to a parent who would probably find that very challenging? So we went through 5 approaches. culturally relevant scenario-based learning. We use simple scenarios that we know can resonate with parents. As the voucher, for instance, there are a lot of scams as regards to as the voucher. A lot of parents see that. So we use that as an example. It was easy, and parents could easily pick that learning from there. We use culturally based relevant examples like the MMM Ponzi scheme that happened in Nigeria a couple of years ago. A lot of parents fell victim for that. So it was easy for us to, pick on that as well. And then we used storytelling. Storytelling is one that we see work very well with parents from diverse communities. So we told stories to help with their learning. The next is interactive learning tools. This is where we then make the learning much more effective by bringing in visual demonstrations, bringing in quizzes. At the end of the day, we had a queen of quiz from one of our parents who got 100%. So we latched on to BBC quizzes and a lot of, online materials. And then we use short videos. Short videos tell the story much better, and it's easier for you to break down things like fishing for parents to be able to understand. And then we also went straight to looking at inclusive learning. Like I mentioned, a lot of our parents don't speak English. So we worked alongside with them. You speak Arabic? Yes, let's translate all this that you've learned so far for the past 6 weeks into Arabic. So we had misinformation translated in Arabic for the parents, and we worked all together. And what does that do? It allowed parents to be able to present in their own language. And, it helps learning to be more accessible, meaningful, and deeply connected to their cultural context. So by the time we got through that loop and parents had the slides themselves, they've learned for the past 6 weeks, we've developed a content in Arabic. We had parents doing the training themselves to their wider community. So beyond the 10 participants that we had a wider community of 30 participants, and that's a picture of the session we had with the wider community. So we had the parents we had trained go into their community to further create more awareness on disinformation and misinformation. And for us, that is impact for us beyond the 10 participants that we started with. And then finally, we then had our young people come in as well as part of it. So we told parents, bring in your children in, because we feel at this particular point in time, we can create that intergenerational knowledge and that will further strengthen digital safety in the entire family. So we had young people come in, and they shared their views around what disinformation and misinformation means to them. And it was so good to see parents and young people interacting together as regards to what they've learned. So far, we've been able to deliver 6 structured training sessions to 10 participants, develop 6 bespoke learning resources, translated the materials, and reached over 30 parents and young people. And that for us is impact. We built confidence to ask questions, confidence to pause before clicking or sharing, and confidence to navigate the digital world more safely. Thanks to 100% Digital Leeds and UK SPF for the funding, and the council also for the support, because we used regional center for all the training, and that was free, which was good. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Is there anything that 100% Digital want to add on the end of that, or are you happy with that mic drop?
Just to tack on that, obviously, Africanus is one of the 5 organisations that have all taken those different approaches. So the final step now in developing the toolkit is for us to look at all those different approaches, pull out some of the sort of golden threads and some of the things that have worked, and then make that into a toolkit that any organisation can pick up to adapt.
And just to go back to the slides that Amy was talking about earlier, all of the work that Bunmi explained there and the other organisations that have worked on the Connecting and Protecting project, and all of the other examples that you see in the report, is why 100% Digital Leeds works in the way that we do. We don't go out and deliver those sessions ourselves. We don't have the expertise. We don't have the relationships with the communities, the deep understanding, whether it's cultural, mental health barriers, physical, the other barriers that Councillor Biffle mentioned earlier. Working with those community organisations who understand their people and their communities and can tailor the digital inclusion support so that it's meaningful is why 100% Digital Leeds community-based approach that Amy mentioned earlier, it's why we work in the way that we do. It has more impact, essentially. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank your team for making the changes to the report to add in different things and stuff after our chair's brief. Looking through it, it was really good to see the impact that we had last year, and then the impact chair's brief already had this year. Okay, any questions? Councillor Layton.
Thank you, Chair. Do you want me to kick off? Yeah, okay. I'll just preface this by saying it's a subject that I'm very, very passionate about. I do want to talk about our ward just for a second, but it's in the context of the question that I will raise, if that's okay. So in conjunction with Age UK, as members, we set up a regular digital inclusion group that happens once every 2 weeks. We have 10 to 12 regulars come. It's been running for 18 months solid. It's great from a social perspective, but it's a group setting, but we can also help them individually. So say, for example, I helped someone set up a tablet only the other day, which was fantastic. So it's with great sadness to be told that Age UK will no longer be funding these sessions locally. And I am very, very concerned about that. So my question really is around how you decide which organisations you are working with. So for me to have something set up for so long, to be told actually that we're no longer going to be funding it is really disappointing, and the people who are going to it are very upset actually. So yeah, how do you decide with the funding you've got? And it's great you are getting funding. And on that map, I could see huge clusters of groups using it quite centrally around Leeds, not much in the outer areas, to be honest with you. You cannot forget about them, right? We have a lot of elderly people in those areas that really need that support. We can't just assume that they are reliant on family members, because they don't always have them and they don't always want to rely on them either. So it's really important that we make sure we can reach those members as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So the map that you saw is a map of the organisations that we work with in any sense, not necessarily their delivery points. So something like Age UK on that map would have a central postcode link to it, rather than the different areas and the different locations in the localities where they might be delivering. But it is true to say that a lot of our work focuses on the inner city areas, or the areas of higher deprivation. That is, I believe, with agreement at the start of the programme, that 80% of the resource would go into those economically deprived areas. The Age UK, the fact that Age UK have decided themselves as an organisation to defund that post is a shame. The funding didn't come from us. The funding was provided by Age UK. We actually provide very little funding in terms of organisations having the capacity to deliver sessions, because that's not sustainable, because we don't get a lot of funding to be able to give out. So the way that we work is to work with organisations to identify and secure external funding, third sector funding. For example, in the most part, we'll give kick-off type grants for organisations to develop their offer when we have the money available through something like UKSPF, but we're not able to provide sustaining grants for work like that to continue. So that is that was a decision of Age UK. They are getting a new CEO, so we'll be picking up the conversation with Age UK about why they've chosen to defund that, and whether they've got a change in whether they would like to focus on digital inclusion. In the meantime, we'd be very happy to speak to the group about other ways that we can arrange for somebody to come and deliver, or whether there are people in the group who might want to do a peer learning, peer support example, as with Afrikindness. So we will work with any organisations that ask for our support, and we'd be keen to be linked back in with your group if we are not already, which I don't have the list in front of me as to whether we are. I know that the decision from Age UK is for the end of this financial year, so it's very recent.
Do you have a follow-up?
Only that actually, you know, we went out and recruited volunteers, so it wasn't that we actually just solely relied on the funding that they had. And it's a wider question that, and it's very difficult when you're dealing with the third sector. Funding does get pulled, but for a programme such as this, consistency is really important. And I that being delivered is fantastic, but it felt a bit sort of haphazard. You know, what is the overall strategy, and why have you decided to focus just are more on areas of deprivation and less on the elderly? Thank you.
So I may get the year wrong, but in 2017 or 18, a previous version of this board asked us to do some mapping. Limited resource, where are you going to target your efforts to have most impact? And so that report is still available on our website. Once I clarify the date, it's 17 or 18. But we did a lot of mapping around, we used a range of indicators. So our colleagues in housing did some survey work with their tenants. We looked at where citizens, residents were accessing council services digitally or in face-to-face or via telephone. So where there was, across the city, where there was lower levels of digital interaction and digital inclusion. And we mapped all of the data, and those, as Amy said, those inner city areas, the areas of high deprivation, were the ones that were predominantly more digitally excluded. We were very conscious, to the point you've already made, Councillor, that there are lots of people not living in those places who are also digitally excluded for all kinds of reasons, the barriers that Councillor Bithell talked about at the start. And so we agreed on an 80-20 split, that we would focus 80% of our activity on the areas that the data showed people were more predominantly digitally excluded in those places, but keep 20% of our capacity across the programme. So whether that's funding, staff time and resource, whether that's some of the partnerships that Amy mentioned earlier, that 80-20 split was agreed. I mean, is it actually 80-20? Is it 70-30, 60-40, 90-10? I'm not sure. But that's why the majority of our focus is on those areas. But I think to Amy's point, we never say no. So if an organisation or if a community of interest, a geographical area, a councillor, will come to us and say, actually, I think you could be doing some more over here. I've got a group, I've got a centre, I've got a community that's not being well served by the programme and is digitally excluded. We're never going to say no. We're never going to say, oh, we're at capacity. But to your wider point about the funding, Chair might come back on that, because one of the questions, I don't know if I'm betraying a confidence, one of the questions that Chair asked us in Chair's brief was, so what are the challenges? And this was a conversation that we had. I won't preempt in case Chair wants to ask that later. Apologies if I have betrayed confidence. I didn't mean to.
No, don't worry. You haven't betrayed my confidence at all. In fact, the more officers can tell everyone how much work I do, the better, if anything. But yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I really love when people come to Scrutiny Board, when officers come to Scrutiny Board, is to tell us where the challenges are. And the challenge that was highlighted was around the fact that our entire system is sort of predicated on the ability of the voluntary sector to continue. And we live in a world at the moment where that's ever more challenging. So I think there will be some discussion around that later. I've got a couple more questions from members, and then I'll get to go through mine, and it will come up from that, I think. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. And just taking up this point that Councillor Layton mentioned about the outer areas and elderly people. I remember in 1997, this won't take long, when the company I worked for was taken over, and we'd been completely paper-based, absolutely paper, and they were all computers, laptops and everything, and I couldn't even find the on switch, you know, and it was a nightmare. However, having gone through that pain, I learnt it because I had to, and you know, things move on. But of course, lots of people haven't had that incentive to do it, that necessity to do it, and they're stranded actually. And I'm thinking of things like patches, the doctor's appointment system. It is a nightmare. My wife was on the other morning, and it took ages to get it to work. And I went into the doctor's, for example, a few weeks ago, and there's a big sign on the wall, and it said, you can access this surgery one of three ways. in person, by telephone or online. So I said to the lad, well, here I am, in person. He said, oh, it doesn't work like that. You know, it's absolutely, everything is designed to stop you getting where you want to go if you're not absolutely clued up. So that's the first point I wanted to make. The second one was a get box. I've lost the information about what this is. Could you just tell me what that is? And then the third point was our speaker mentioned Arabic and having to translate from Arabic to English. Do you use translators for that service, please? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the question. We've got interpreters, volunteers who speak and can translate English to Arabic and vice versa. So we utilize in-house resources for that particular service, and they worked with the parents.
Because one of the things which strikes me is that you can use Google Translate, can't you?
Yes, we can. A lot of the parents we work with, are still very much digitally excluded, so we're still teaching how to switch on the computer and things. We've not gotten to the stage where they can confidently use Google Translation. We will get there because we've gotten funding from Amy and Jason to continue with our digital, training. So we will get to that point. But for now, for this project, we had to use in-house resources. And it also helped us to really have that conversation. So it's easy, sometimes to use Google Translation without having an understanding of what you're translating anyway. But with someone working alongside with you, it was easier for us to continue that conversation around misinformation, disinformation. What does it mean to you in your language? How do we convert that from English to Arabic? And we did that all together. And I guess that was more impactful for us. Thank you.
And I guess that's part of the issue with almost you need a glossary for these sort of things in the different languages ready for translation, because the word misinformation might be able to, in a sort of linguistic sense, be translated, but that direct translation isn't necessarily in Arabic the same meaning. It might be a different word, especially for things like fishing, which is obviously a wildly novel new word. Amy, did you want to come in on the other parts of the question?
Please, I'd just like to comment on the translation thing as well. I think it's worth noting as well that one of the sort of classic ways, for want of a better word, of identifying misinformation, disinformation, or phishing or scams is to read the wording and see whether there are any odd linguistic choices, or whether anything doesn't make sense, or whether contextually the language used sort of points to the person writing it not being the person that they say they are. And I think when translating from a different language, that makes it all the more harder. And when using something like Google Translate to translate that, it makes it all the more difficult because you can't pick up those initial little signs that something may not be truthful and from the source that it suggests. For the other point, so agree that there is an increased usage of digital tools such as patches in GP practices. You see in the report that there's an example of how we've worked with NHS England to support uptake of the NHS app, and also supporting NHS England to understand how digital exclusion impacts on the use of the app and how they can improve their services to be more inclusive by having some of their staff volunteer at our sessions. But we have a key work stream around health and wellbeing, and we, or rather our colleague Rachel that leads that work, has done a lot of work with Leeds Community Healthcare, with Leeds Teaching Hospital Trust, with GP Confederation, and with particular GP practices and primary care networks to look at how they can, how the staff can support uptake of patches and other digital tools in a way that takes digital exclusion into account and is more effective, and also for some of those practices, or the and I might get the words wrong here, patient advisory groups, I think is what the term is, to be able to offer hands-on support to patients in those practices and health centres. So it is something that we're working on, but obviously the nature of digital transformation is that organisations will be looking to increase the number of digital tools for cost savings. In terms of get boxes, I apologise for not giving a more detail on that because it's not in this particular report, other than just a mention of Jangala as a national partner, which is why I wanted to focus on it. It was mentioned in the previous year's report, but a get box is a plug-in Wi-Fi solution, basically. So all you need is a plug in the wall. It's like a SIM card with little antennas on it. You can attach different, you treat it basically as Wi-Fi, but it means that it's free, it doesn't need any hard wiring. People that are in temporary accommodation or moving around can pick it up, unplug it and plug it back in wherever they go. Does that help? Thank you.
I don't think it's your place to apologise for not mentioning that. It's probably mine for making us speak so quickly. I'll take that one. Neil?
It is on page 23 in paragraph 12. You mention young people aged 16 to 34. 34's not young, is it? I was married with a mortgage. That sounds very odd. You're supposed to be married with a mortgage and kids. What's the problem? 34's too old.
What an incredibly niche question. Does anyone have an answer to whether a 34-year-old is in fact still relatively young?
Not directly. That feels more philosophical than I'm qualified to answer. All I will say is that line particularly is copied directly from the Ofcom website. So they were the age brackets and the terminology that they used when they were putting together their research. But I'm not going to get drawn into whether 34 is young. As I look around the room, I'm not going to.
Can confirm it is. Okay, Councillor Goodall, bring us back on track.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this report. It's fantastic. I just particularly want to mention the case studies on page 50 and 51. It's really nice to see the actual case studies to just kind of get the real impact of what you're doing. Bunmi, I just wanted to pick up on what you said about intergenerational knowledge. I think that's really important. I think sometimes we might forget, for example, I work a lot with university students. They have been massively hit by scams. One has been ticket scams for things like gigs. The other one has been employment scams where somebody says you need to pay £100 in order to apply for this job. So I think sometimes people really assume that because younger people have grown up with it, they're not affected by it, but they really are. But I think they're sometimes affected by different kinds of scams. So having that intergenerational thing where people can kind of check each other can be really important. I love the thing on page 30 about community calling scheme that I think probably many of us have seen in casework where we're struggling to contact somebody because they don't have that phone access. So it's really important for us as counsellors that people have access to phones so that we can actually contact them to pick up on what they're talking about. The one thing I would say, and this is probably my question mostly, is I have to admit I didn't know that much that this was happening. So it's fantastic to know about it. I know resources are limited and there's just so much comms going on, but shouting about this more would be fantastic. It's obviously great that you're here. I'm wondering, I don't think it's covered in the councillor induction. It would be great to have more about this during councillor inductions and training. I know, again, that's a really crowded field, fitting everything to induction, but it feels like such an important thing. I think it would be really good to have it there. Yeah, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm not convinced there was actually any questions for officers in there, but commentary and more of a question for me. So am I all right to just pick that up, or did you want a response from officers?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing for officers, I suppose, is how are we publicising this, and how is there a way we can publicise it more? Yeah,
go for it.
Thank you, Councillor. So I just wanted to mention about the community calling that you mentioned. So It's not, I think, in this report because we didn't have enough space to go into such detail, but we have reserved some funds and are using some funding to buy some more funds as well to have a second phase of a pilot that we started with libraries and community hubs, with certain libraries and community hubs being pick-up points for people to be signposted to by Leeds City Council staff and councillors who have individuals that don't have a device and would like to put a request in on their behalf for a phone and SIM card. So that is on pause at the moment while we look at those processes and look at how we can protect the library frontline staff from lots of people coming and asking them for phones, which is what's happened, and how we put some more robust process around that. But the aim is for us to be able to identify enough resource to have that as a long-term sustainable solution for especially council colleagues, for that exact reason that you mentioned, Councillor. In terms of how you can stay in touch with us and our work, we produce a monthly newsletter, which you're very welcome to subscribe to. We can send you the information. I will say it did not go out last month because we've been quite busy on scrutiny report, but ordinarily it goes out every month, and it is aimed at organisations and delivery partners with that information. We also have our website, digitalinclusionleeds.com, where we write up the vast majority of our work. So the reports that are mentioned in here, the appendices, are on our website in blog form, and we try and write as we go. We also share on LinkedIn. We're happy to speak directly as well. And I think, speaking on behalf of the team, I think we'd be really pleased to include some information around digital inclusion and 100% digital Leeds in councillor induction and training. Thank you.
Lovely. The element around councillor induction, I think that's a really good idea. It is a hellscape time for new councillors in terms of the volume of information. I wonder if the way to do it, and we can break this in, we can broach this as a recommendation if members are engaged with it, is to ask Andrea to look at putting it in. And my suggestion would be that we do it not as a 100% digital session, because I don't think there probably is the capacity in it for that, but to do almost a speed dating of sort of maybe 6 or 7 of the things that councillors will most want to be able to recommend service-wise to organisations in their ward. Because there's a bunch of different pockets that we do in the council that actually I spend my life being like, well, have you contacted? And actually that would be really useful information. So like almost a set of stalls in the councillors just move around and can have that discussion. So if people are content with that, we'll add that as a recommendation to start speed dating. And we'll hand that into Andrea. Lovely. Councillor Dye.
Thank you. Just on that point, whether we could, if we're going to do it for the first time, extend that invitation to all members. I don't know whether that's manageable.
You'd like to take part in speed dating?
I would love to, yes, please.
You heard it here first.
Thank you. Right, okay, so my comments were really about the misinformation work, which, you know, I just want to say a huge thank you for doing. It's such an important piece of work, and people have shared examples as well as the really interesting examples that you've put in the report of how it affects people. And Councillor Goodall's absolutely right. It isn't just older people. You know, it's something that affects all of us. Sometimes I just feel like I'm constantly bombarded with stuff over the internet that is poisonous, and I think it's only going to get worse. So I know you've said in the report that you are planning on putting the toolkit out, but is there are there plans to continue to work with organisations in person as well? Because it seems to me that has been really powerful, and the examples from Afrikindness and the other ones in the report show that it's been life-changing for some people.
Thank you, Councillor. So the toolkit is for organisations to be able to use, to be able to understand some of the best practice from the 5 organisations that we've worked with, so that they can see how they can apply some of that in their own setting. In Leeds, we will absolutely be there to be able to support organisations with that. We haven't got as far as looking at how we're going to launch and how we'll support uptake. There will certainly be a launch webinar or something like that. We're also talking to Ofcom about how our learning can be shared more broadly across the UK, and how it can be be highlighted as, you know, supporting national strategy. We are keen to identify funding to be able to give grants to organisations to, in essence, test the toolkit, to take that toolkit, look at how they apply that learning in their own community setting to meet the needs of their particular people and communities they work with. And that is something that we are looking at. But we know that there are a lot of organisations that are already, that we've been able to support to build the sort of, you know, digital inclusion foundations, so they have the capacity to deliver digital inclusion interventions in general, and that have identified misinformation and disinformation as a priority, and will be able to use some of that existing capacity to be able to test the toolkit. But we would love to see more organisations have a second phase of the toolkit development, basically, and if and when we identify funding for that, that's what we'll do.
Yeah.
Thank you. That sounds really, really encouraging. And can I just ask that we get invited to a webinar as councillors too, because we will be able to cascade that through to the organisations that we're familiar with in our wards. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Just on that, I wonder whether on that second phase we can utilise our original phase almost as mentoring for those next generation. I'm just thinking the work that Bunmi's done on the Arabic and the peer and training the trainer type stuff. Actually, there's a number of different organisations with a number of different communities that aren't necessarily African diaspora based, where that would be a real benefit. So it would be good to see that. Given that that's all of the other councillors' questions, I'm going to have a pop now. And I just wanted to... oh, did you have your hand up? Oh, you're going to have to wave a bit bigger. Councillor Bruce would like to.
Well, my original question was around gaps, which has partly been covered. So what do you... I mean, obviously you're doing brilliant work in trying to fill some of those gaps that exist. But what are the gaps that still remain that you're not covering? We've discussed outer areas and older people. I mean, I represent an outer area in Ardsley and Robin Hood, which is poorly served by public transport. It's a collection of small villages. So that makes them more excluded in a way. I know you said if we have any groups to contact you, Jason, but that's not exactly targeting the most deprived areas, which we do have in outer areas. So a suggestion might be we have community committee funds. We do have funds available, so maybe you could tap into that to get to some of the outer areas. And it's not just older people. There's lots of people who need it in our areas. My other question was about AI. I don't think that's been mentioned. How are you helping people to work through that, and how are you assisting them to navigate AI and the challenges ahead? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of the outer areas, so whilst some of the areas are more, the outer areas are not very well served in terms of there being a place in the area where people can go to be able to get support, they are served by organisations that have a citywide reach, such as Carers Leeds, such as national partners like AbilityNet that are able to go into people's homes and volunteer. So there is support there for those people that are communities of interest that that have circumstances that mean that they're particularly more likely to be digitally excluded, such as unpaid carers. It might be that there's something around people knowing that that support is there, because it's obviously not as visible as there being, you know, go to the village hall on a Tuesday and you can go, which is much more easy to signpost to. The offer of funding is very much appreciated. We would still need that infrastructure in the place in terms of a group or a location where something could be delivered by someone, given that we don't deliver things ourselves. But as with the example of Educate, while that's not a great example because that's no longer available, there are organisations with that citywide reach that I'm sure will be pleased with additional funding to deliver digital skills sessions in a particular area, if we could identify that funding, a location, etc. So yeah, we'd be pleased to talk about that. In terms of AI, the identifying and being aware of AI and how that is used to produce mis and disinformation content has been a big part of the connecting and protecting work. I don't know whether you want to...
Yes, AI was covered in our training module. It's one complex and challenging subject. And one of the key things that we had to use was spot the difference. That was a very good exercise for our parents. It was a good exercise for me because I missed out on a whole lot of, you know, when I was doing it. But it helped reflect. It helped our parents reflect, including myself, on some of those, you know, red flags, some of those things that you need to watch out for, especially on social media and a lot of content information out there. Then when we did this session with our young people, they were very smart. Jesus, they spotted out a whole lot during that session, and they helped a lot of parents to be able to, you know, identify those red flags, things like that. And then obviously we had the tutor who took time out for the session. The other thing I probably would want to add to that is probably going forward. I mean, we only did that for a certain number, just 30 parents. It would be great to increase more awareness and, you know, spread the word around the impact of AI and when it comes to misinformation and disinformation. We had a session with Quick Line Communications for our young people recently, and they did a very fantastic work with our young people on AI and the impact. And I guess they also do that in schools as well. So it might be another avenue, I don't know, from 100% digital Leeds to see how we can have such kind of awareness session in schools to educate our young people more, because I think they have that skills and could help parents navigate, you know, the digital world when it comes to AI. Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the negatives of AI, and obviously it's positive that you're sharing that. But it's obviously there's a lot of good that comes with AI, and it can help with a lot as well. You know, that should be harnessed too. Yeah. Yes.
And we're currently, so one of the things we do in Africaness, aside the fact that we work with parents, we also have our young people work stream as well. So we have some digital ambassadors that we work with. They focus on, you know, the online world. They've worked with organizations like ChildNet, for instance, and they're doing a lot of work around looking at these things. How do you utilize AI positively in the right way for education, for, you know, research work and things like that. So we have that angle that we, you know, supporting young people with, and really, really pushing them out there to work, partner with organizations, and to use that as a mentoring, you know, guide for some of our young people. At the same time, we're also looking at the negative impact as well, and ensuring that they're able to spot the red flags out there, and, you know, they don't fall victim of any, you know, issues around the use of AI, you know, that is out there. I don't know if that helps. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'm really aware of the time, as I always am. So I'm going to ask some questions, but don't feel like you have to answer them all now. I'm happy to take some in writing if that's a more effective and efficient option. I just wanted to highlight to both the public and to members paragraph 10, and it's that people that feel they're confident versus people who are actually able to do the work, to know whether or not they're confident and know whether or not something is correct or is misinformation. There is a relatively high level of confidence. That doesn't necessarily mean there's a high level of actual success in seeing it. And I guess that's part of why this rose last year. Looking at the key activities, sort of number 44 onwards, really, there's a lot of cross scrutiny board remit work that potentially could be done. And I spoke to members in the pre-meeting, and we would like to suggest a recommendation around a cross scrutiny working group that looks at the digital inclusion work, as well as work on AI across the council, and capacity within the council as well. Sort of a, how can we scrutinise digitalising the city while we digitalise the council type strapline. It really writes itself. Is that something that you guys would support as a recommendation? Lovely. We also had the conversation already a little bit about the incredible work that's being done, but the potential that a lot of it rests on the third sector. So I'm suggesting the recommendation continue to support third sector organisations to maintain infrastructure for digital inclusion. If people are happy with that? Yeah. Yes. Excellent. And then question-wise, when we talk about misinformation, I mean, I think it's really important. We've almost, and I don't think it's the case reading through the report that was done, but for the purposes of the public watching this, all 400,000 of them, I think it's really important that we're clear on the difference between misinformation, disinformation, i.e. the accidental versus the on purpose, but then also the difference between that and scams, because actually a scam is about getting something out of you, whereas mis and disinformation is more around changing hearts and minds type stuff. And I guess part of the thing that I wondered whether we covered was when we know something's misinformation or disinformation, do we, in these projects, look at the impact and help people to deal with the impact of that on them? I'm thinking of things that come out from the far right around racially offensive stuff. Do we help young people? It's probably actually realistically a question for you. Do you help young people through this project to navigate not just knowing that's disinformation, but actually the psychological impact it has, seeing that on them as they go through the internet more widely? And then I also wondered whether it doesn't talk in here about parental controls and training parents how to use parental controls to protect their young people. I wondered if that was something that we were doing and it just wasn't listed. And then finally, the digital inclusion toolkit that's mentioned in next steps and has been mentioned in the meeting. Once that's up and running, can that be sent to Becky so that it can be shared around the scrutiny board, please? Is there anything there that you're happy to answer now?
Yeah, I can answer the part on parental control. So aside the digital inclusion sessions that we hold, we also hold sessions on safeguarding separately. So there's a training on safeguarding, there is a training on neurodiversity, and there is a training on parenting with purpose, confident parenting. So part of the things that we educate parents on is on parental controls. We did a session just over the weekend with a group of parents online, just demonstrating, you know, the types of controls parents can put in place to safeguard their children when they're online. We have a session for young people. We have, I think, over 100 young people on the session for Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 using GCSE Pod. Is a software that we got the license for to be able to support young people navigating GCSE routes and things like that. And part of the things we train the children on first before, you know, getting them on that particular software, especially the parents, is how to, you know, put that required control so that when your children are online, they're safe online, because we take that responsibility anyway, because we're offering that service. So we have that session, which isn't covered through 100% digital lead, but it's part of our parenting programs that we offer for parents. Yeah, I hope that helps.
And what about the impact on people?
So I'll just answer on behalf of Damask, one of the organisations that we work with on this. So as I mentioned, we're halfway through, two-thirds of the way through this piece of work, and we still need to do some work on looking at what is some of the learning and some of the approaches that we want to recommend that other organisations pick up as we develop the toolkit. One of the things, if on page 45, which is also page 9 in the appendix, you can see Damask, one of the issues that they identified and discussed as they support mostly Arabic people, Arabic women in particular, that there had been some disinformation, I think it would be, that had been spread that had affected the individuals in the group, and that they had inadvertently passed around as being real, around a fake Home Office post encouraging or warning people to not go out on a particular day in a hijab, because there was going to be it wasn't going to be safe, basically. And so I know that within that session there was a discussion in the group around how that made those women feel, and recognising as part of the learning that it is designed to build up fear and to make people want to react quickly and to spread that information, and recognition that the ladies in that group had spread that disinformation because they wanted to prevent other people from being at risk, but that they had inadvertently spread that fear. I can't attest to how exactly they as a group went about supporting people through that feeling of fear, and it's something that I think is good to point out as we develop the toolkit in how we can encourage organisations to support in that manner as well.
Right, thanks for the question on that. During the session we had, obviously there was a part where we encourage parents to speak out as regards to experiences they've had when it comes to misinformation and disinformation. So we had a lot of parents share real life experiences, and some of them were quite very touching. We had a parent who was fully scammed and lost lots of money that she had saved for years for our son's school fees, so which was quite very, had a very negative impact on her. At this session, we managed that appropriately and supported her. But beyond the training in itself, we're told parents of how to report, issues like this. So we gave them some, I think is it Active or Action Learn or something? I can't remember the name of the organization where parents can actually report directly. And then we also gave tips on what to do if you're not sure. Utilize resources like ourselves. We can help check through information before you click anything, especially for those that struggle with English as the first language. We also talked about red flags that parents need to, watch out for. That is prevention in itself. But in terms of when an impact, negative impact has been created, one of the key things we often do tell parents is seek support immediately when you have issues like that. And we have our mental health counselors as well in-house. So we offer that as well in-house. We have CAMS practitioners in-house and who offer support to parents, especially during stressful periods and situations that a lot of parents do have. So we have someone that's, looks at that psychological, impact and support parents accordingly. So Africanness in a way, just probably to help put in context what we do, we have 4 work streams and it covers everything around parenting. supporting parents. We have parents work stream that looks at breaking cultural barriers and supporting parents with the right tools and resources. So from webinars, workshops, and toolkits, we have that. We have the children and young people working directly with these children and young people and ensuring that, you know, they have the required, you know, support to navigate life in itself and thrive in the society. Then we have the research arm that backs up some of our activities with data and statistics and ensuring that, you know, we're not just going out there doing the work, but we have a team looking critically at the impact and the outcomes of, you know, some of the work that we do. Then we have the education team who then looks critically about our educational programs and, you know, ensuring that it really, really meets the needs of the people. We're really educating and creating that awareness. So they look at our content, ensuring that our content are fit for purpose, and it's really, you know, supports the niche of parents that we're looking at. So that's how we provide that holistic approach when it comes to supporting parents. I hope that helps.
Thank you, that's great. Jason?
Thank you, Chair. Really quickly. Should have coughed before I pressed the button, so apologies. I think the question is really well put because it speaks to the wider approach of 100% digital Leeds. We've talked already earlier in the meeting about the capacity of the third sector and the challenges and the pressures that the third sector are under. The third sector are also picking up and dealing with the impact, the negative impact of their service users, their communities who have become victims to whether it is scams, misinformation, disinformation, the mental health toll that puts on people, the fear and anxiety that adds to people, the the financial loss, if as Bunmi's articulated, if they have fallen victim to a scam. All of that is additional work for that third sector organisation. And so the way that we position digital inclusion is as a means to an end and a way of reducing the work, that the more digitally included people become, the more power they have over their own lives, the more control they can take, the more decisions they can make, and hopefully, eventually, improves outcomes for the individual, but reduces the load and the burden on the VCSE organisation. So I think it's a really well-made question.
Thank you. Okay. I'm wildly late compared to where I was meant to be, but that's been such a good discussion, and it's absolutely lovely to read through something that has so many good bits of work in it. Having a report like that is always a delight. So, in terms of the actions, we need to do the recommendations. So the recommendations are: consider and note the positive impact of the work of 100% digital Leeds digital inclusion team and their voluntary community and social enterprise delivery partners taking part in the Connecting and Protecting Communities project. Note and endorse the 100% digital Leeds team's wider work with organisations across all sectors to increase digital inclusion and improve outcomes for communities across Leeds. Agree any other scrutiny actions. Oh no, that's not one. We're having other ones. To recommend a joint scrutiny board working group on digital inclusion during 2026-27 with a focus on digital as an enabler of other objectives. The speed dating counsellor induction recommendation. And then to continue to support third sector organisations to mainstream infrastructure, and a recommendation to send that digital toolkit around to scrutiny members so we can, in fact, probably realistically all members, so that we can then endorse that with our community organisations, would be my suggested list of recommendations. Do we want to include an extra word in the bit about and improve outcomes for communities across Leeds? Maybe something along the lines of those who have been less served by the last 10 years of 100% digital, just to give you guys a little bit of space to do that extra stuff. If it was us that tied you down to the 80-20 in the past, it might be worth us allowing a little spread a decade on. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So we'll stick an extra couple of words in there as well. by we I mean Becky. And with that, I'm going to call for a comfort vote. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Bummy, for coming in. It was absolutely brilliant. You are incredibly impressive, as is your organisation. And the rest of you need to be back here in 7 minutes. That's my favourite number, it turns out, today. Good morning and welcome back. If members can take their seats, please. Thank you. Okay, we move on to item 9, which is our local flood risk management strategy annual update. In the council's constitution, this scrutiny board is allocated special responsibility for the flood risk management, which I personally am very grateful we have. To discharge that duty, we usually receive an annual update on the implementation of the local flood risk management strategy. Last year, this was delayed, so we received an update in July 25 instead of April 2025. This report brings us up to date on progress since July. I want to take this opportunity to thank Jonathan and his team for the work over the last year and the work in pulling this comprehensive annual update together. And again, similar to the last one, just a special thank you for the changes you made to the paper and the slides to get some information across that I asked for in Chair's brief. It really is very gratefully received when those changes are made live and in person. The achievements reflected in this paper have been delivered by a relatively small team of people, and I'd like to put on record my thanks for the work that they do. And I think when members and the public read through those numbers that you guys have achieved, it really is something quite astounding. I should also add that the local flood risk management strategy will be updated this summer, and the scrutiny board will be consulted as part of its progress under the budget and policy framework. It's anticipated the executive board will approve a referral to consult on the refresh plan in April, and therefore expect to consider the refresh in June 2025. And then I also just asked, because I thought it might be helpful for us as we discuss it, not knowing your individual qualifications, councillors, within the geographical field, that during the officer introduction, can I ask for a brief explanation of the difference between groundwater and infiltration management, please? Thank you. Sorry, I forgot to get you to introduce yourselves. My mistake.
Good morning, Gary Bartlett, Chief Officer for Highways and Transportation.
Good morning, everybody. Jonathan Moxon, Executive Manager for Flood and Climate Resilience Management, working within Highways and Transportation.
Morning, everyone. Mark Garford, Principal Engineer in the Flood and Climate Resilience Management team.
Morning, Gemma Garcia, Group Engineer within Flood and Climate Resilience Management team.
Thank you. Sorry, sometimes I forget that I have to get you guys to introduce because I just already know you, but I'm not the only one here. Okay, if you guys want to do your opening comments, that'd be ideal. Thank you.
Before we start on the slides, would it be helpful if I give that sort of distinction between infiltration and groundwater?
Yeah, unless you'd like me to go full geography teacher.
I do feel like I'm about to be marked on my knowledge, but I
like everyone to feel that way all the time.
I'll do my best. Thank you. So yeah, Mark and the team are just going to run through some slides on the sort of summary points from the report. So we'll go through that in a second. And that's quite brief, and obviously happy to pick up any other questions. On the groundwater and infiltration system, so groundwater is a type of flood risk that local authorities are responsible for. We thankfully, touch wood, we don't have huge problems in Leeds around groundwater. But the difference is infiltration tends to be the water that's fallen out of the sky, might go onto the roads and highways, might pass through your own drainage on your property, then has to get into the land. So it could either enter a watercourse and join a river and eventually goes to the sea, but it may also go into the land and end up in an aquifer or an underground system, or it may eventually go through the land and into a watercourse and out into a system. Groundwater tends to work the other way. So that's the water that's already in the land and it might have passed underground, but then it will start to come back up to the surface. So when we tend to use a commonly used term might be the water table, we'll often talk about the level of the water table and that's risen. That tends to be a good description of what groundwater is. So groundwater is something that's already in the underground systems, within the soil, within the land, or even deeper within an aquifer or the rock formations under the land. And then it's
actually there's so much water in that system that actually that starts to build and it will find its way into the system. And it's not necessarily the low-lying areas in the city. It can actually find its way in quite upland areas as well. But that's a very sort of, it's based on the underlying geology and the rock formations under the soil.
That was excellent. And it will become clear later why I thought that was useful extra context. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The focus of my presentation today is on how flood and climate resilience management can support climate resilience in Leeds. Next slide, please. Thank you. You'll all be familiar with the Leeds Fast 2 project completed in November 2024. The mandate for this project was to take a catchment-wide approach to reducing flood risk in Leeds. The Air Resilience Company has been formed to continue and maintain the natural flood management of Leeds Fast 2 in the upper catchment. Specifically, as this slide shows, the engineering works of Leeds Fast 2 incorporated a climate change allowance up until 2039, equating to a 3% reduction in flow of a flood of a similar magnitude to Boxing Day 2015. ARC will deliver natural flood management work, which will increase this climate change allowance from 2039 to 2069 by providing a further 5% reduction in flows. So the catchment-wide works are trying to form a specific target for Leeds' benefit. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. This slide provides an overview of the works ARC will carry out to hit our targets. Many different interventions will be carried out, such as soil aeration, hedge planting, and by the delivery partners Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and the Air Rivers Trust. A total of 750,000 trees will be planted by our partners, the White Rose Forest. The nationally significant part of ARC is, as well as public funding, we will be using private financial contributions from business partners, primarily located in Leeds, to fund the works in the upper catchment. Last month, we hit our target figure of £225,000 from business partners such as Yorkshire Water, the University of Leeds, Lloyds Bank and Sainsbury's to allow ARC to start trading. As well as delivering the works as part of the 5-year contract with business partners, ARC will now focus on increasing the contributions to £400,000 by the end of year 2. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So this slide covers an overview of our flood response, specifically within the flood and climate resilience management team. The green team manage the Leeds FAS more generally, whilst the yellow team manage the flood storage area constructed as part of Leeds Fast 2 near Calverley. The blue team manage the response to flood risk more generally across the district, including away from the River Aire. And I'm talking situations whereby sandbags may be required for certain communities and such like. The DFRM role, or Duty Flood Risk Manager role, oversees the work of all 3 teams and reports to our RET team as appropriate. We need approximately 30 people to make the structure work effectively, and the ongoing FCRM recruitment is helping us to move towards this figure, as is working with colleagues to ensure we are as flexible as possible to accommodating individual needs. Okay, next slide, please. This and the next slide have been included to inform the board that we are currently updating our local flood risk management strategy to align with our Leeds ambitions. Following consultation, including with this group, we hope to have the strategy adopted by full council this summer. One of the 3 visions included in the emerging strategy is climate resilience, and this topic is central to the 6 objectives in the document. Next slide, please. This slide emphasises that of the 6 objectives, climate resilience is at the core of 4 in particular. And these are Objective 1, champion innovative and affordable approaches to flood protection. Objective 2, embed flood and climate risk resilience in all aspects of urban planning and regeneration. Objective 5, engage and empower communities in flood risk awareness and decision making. And Objective 6 is improve evidence-based understanding and deliver of flood risk solutions. That's the end of my presentation, and I would invite any questions, please.
Lovely, thank you. Do members have any questions, please? Councillor Dye.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and thanks for the report, and most importantly, thanks for all the work that is being done. It's hugely important. So if I can unpick some questions that came out of reading the report and some that came out of the presentation. So the first one from the presentation, you said you're seeking further financial contributions. So just interested in how that's going. You seem to have some great contributions initially from partners who are probably kind of willing partners in a lot of senses. So question really is what work is being done and how is it going in terms of engaging other partners, because there must be businesses across the city who are likely to be impacted but might not be so willing as the ones who've already paid up. Second one was about the objectives. Really great to see climate resilience in there, and particularly about Objective 5, the community is interested in the work that's going on there, and particularly if there's anything that we can assist with in terms of engaging communities. And then going to the report itself, there was one on page 64, 3.19, surface water flooding. So clearly that is projected to be something that as we face a changing climate is going to get worse for us as a world, not just as the city, but in terms of the work that we're doing as a city. So just interested in the work that's specifically going on about surface water flooding. And then I think the last one was about some of the data systems that you mentioned. Really interested in the technical systems. I think there's one mentioned on page 65, AMX. How is that improving the work that your team does? And I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, you'd like to answer those?
Thank you. So in terms of the business partner contributions to £400,000, we are currently in a process of working with our board to agree a strategy on the 225 to £400,000 contribution. In the meantime, in the short term, whilst that's happening, we are revisiting some of the initial businesses who were not able to contribute up to the 225,000, but for whatever reason, but they hadn't ruled themselves out at the time. So we're opening up those conversations. On the 2nd of March, I believe, we went live with the communication on ARC started trading. And we're already seeing that there's signs of businesses contacting us to see whether they could contribute also. So I feel like right here and now we're in a good place. For the engagement side of the new strategy, I would ask that help with the consultation. Publicising is by members if at all possible. It's not always easy for us to reach the many different audiences. So once we do go into that phase, a push by members would be greatly appreciated. In terms of 3.1.9, surface water is an increasing issue, and you'll be pleased to know that in the emerging new strategy, we're placing a greater emphasis on blue-green infrastructure and trying to manage surface water more sustainably at its source, rather than the traditional approach of trying to dispose of it, move it as fast as possible. I think a really good example of how we're working with communities within Leeds on this issue is within Garforth. We're working in partnership with the Environment Agency on the West Yorkshire Adaptive Pathways piece of work, and that is very, very strong on community engagement in terms of we don't decide where the town wants to take itself from flood risk point of view. The town working with us do exactly that. In terms of adaptation pathways, the difference compared to a traditional scheme is not everything is delivered all at the same time. The point being that as climate change increases, there's trigger points which require works to be carried out. So it's a constant evaluating the situation over the next 100 years or so, as opposed to starting a £10 million construction scheme over a 2-3 year period. And if I could invite Jonathan, please, to cover the point on AMX.
I'll just add a point as well on from a surface water flooding point of view. You're right. I think that the Environment Ministry last year released their national flood risk assessment data, and it shows a lot more properties across the country at flood risk from both rivers and sea, and from surface water, it's in the millions. So we will absolutely see that in Leeds. I think that's reflected in the way that our programme is changing. So a really good example is what we've done, or what we're doing in the Meanwood catchment. I know some members have been invited to recent events that we've done to engage the community around the change. So we were exploring the opportunity to deliver flood risk reservoirs a little bit like we did on Leeds Fast 2, and that's still the right solution in some places. But in Meanwood, it's a really good opportunity to also look at the sources of flooding and not just manage the risk at the end of the chain. And so that actually a big part of the scheme will be about surface water management. So that's quite a shift in sort of the way that our programme looks, but it reflects that change. So that's likely to see a range of options come forward rather than one engineering scheme in one place. It will be a range of interventions that try to catch water at source, use SUDS, blue-green infrastructure, change highway design in terms of the way that we manage surface water runoff, use public spaces to manage that runoff, and also engage the community. There's a lot that we all do, sometimes without realising that has an impact on the wider community's flood risk, like paving over our driveways, or extending driveways in the front garden, or disconnecting just disconnecting your downpipe and putting that through a rainwater harvester or water. But it can actually, if enough people do that, it's a big deal. So things like that, we will look at this slightly different approach. On the technical systems side of things, we do a lot around the data that we've got on flood risk. We feel that's really important for making good decisions. And one of the things that we've actually done across highways and transportation is bring in a new asset management system. So flood and climate resilience management already had a similar system that manages our data and asset data, but certainly the completion of Leeds Fast 2 meant we've got thousands more assets that are all quite different, and the new AMX system is sort of industry leading asset management system that's really helpful for us in terms of managing a range of assets. And so we've been through a period of implementation on that in the last few months, but that is now going live next week for everybody. The flood risk management team, or the flood and climate resilience management team, are live now already, and we've been working on that for the last few months. So it does help us to get good asset data, make good decisions about maintenance and management and budgets and all those sorts of things.
Lovely, thank you. I'm just going to, before I bring in Councillor Goodall, because he's next, I'm just going to bring in a point on the surface water. I was also obviously very aware of the changes to the flood risk levels and the impact that's going to have, and I wondered whether we wanted to use surface water flooding, which was why I wanted the groundwater versus infiltration explained at the beginning, because one of the key things around, like you were talking about the water butts, one of the key ways is to slow down infiltration happening and going into drainage, and adding those harvesters, for example, is a way to do that. But also in the way that we use our road aggregates and all that sort of stuff. So I wondered if our dive next time wanted to be, or the request from the flooding paper wanted to be more focused on surface water flooding and flash flooding, if people are content with that. Excellent. So we'll have that as a recommendation then, that the next year's one, next year's topic, curriculum item will be, and then Councillor Goodall. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of kind of river flooding questions and then a couple of surface water ones. So with the Aire Valley kind of Kirkstall project, I couldn't see in the paperwork, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was taken from a 1 in 50 year risk of flooding. Is there a figure now for a 1 in however many years risk of flooding on that? The other thing I was going to say about that is there was a brilliant paper, I couldn't find it, but I think it was called something like A Tale of Two Valleys, about the Cumbria floods the same year, where one river was, it was about what the effects of upstream and how far downstream the effects were. So two sides of the same hill, one was the river was straightened and it was all farmland, there were no trees, etc. The other side, the river was left curvy and meandering. Exactly, thank you. I did do ecology, sorry, I should know. And you know, there were everything to alleviate flooding, and it had a huge effect a long way downstream. So I just wondered how much work there is happening with Dales agencies, for example, to look at that. Locally on flash flooding, I know some of the people that are involved in the Meanwood Valley project, and I know they're very happy to see those things happening. Rain gardens, I know from speaking to a consultant at WSP who specialises in flood management, it's very quick to install rain gardens. It says within 1 day you can move to utilities because it's so shallow. But also, I know there's a big issue about street trees, but can we do more street trees? Because that alleviates flooding, it cools down temperatures. Other cities seem to manage it. There seems to be more resistance here. And the last question was about planning. Are we confident that planning are working with you to make sure that we're not building in areas that are at risk of flooding?
Thank you. So in terms of Kirkstall standards of protection, I think before Leeds Fast 2 started construction, the standard protection was actually lower than 1 in 50 in certain areas, such as Armley Mills or Leeds Industrial Museum. Following the £150 million scheme, the standard protection is now a 1 in 200 year, which is a similar magnitude to the Boxing Day 2015 flood event. And on top of that, we've got the climate change allowance that I referred to in the first 2 slides. So we're in a much better place across the city in terms of the River Aire generally. I think it's important to note there's always residual risk, whether that's exceedance of our design for Leeds Fast 2 or other sources of flooding, including the already mentioned surface water flood risk. So that's my answer for the first question. In terms of meandering rivers and such like, as part of the optioneering on Leeds Fast 2, all options were considered, but of course we need to take into account the geography of where we're carrying out the works. So, for example, meander in the river in an urban environment such as Leeds wasn't possible. However, it is a measure that was considered in the upper catchment directly by us, but it wasn't shown to be effective as far downstream as Leeds, simply because the channel is far exceeded by the time the big flood events arrive. That said, we're working with partners right the way from Malham down to Leeds to look at opportunities to where we can slow the flow sustainably for mutual benefits, not solely Leeds. If I can invite Jonathan to cover the points about the rain garden and planning, please.
Yeah, just to build on Mark's point as well, I think the report, it might have mentioned the term rewiggling in that. I think that was the phrase that they used. So that is, it's helpful that, because it just engages people in the principle. So that is, yeah, that's a new technical term for remeandering rivers, but I'm sure it was that report. So there are other schemes further up the Aire Valley, that like in Keighley and the Worth Valley and other places where, as Mark's rightly said, we think what we've done on the Leeds FAS, and certainly with their resilience company, can complement those schemes as well. So obviously from our perspective, we've an objective and we've a target to meet in terms of making sure we're doing what we need to do to complement Leeds FAS, but we do want to take that catchment-wide sort of partnership approach where what we've put in place is helpful for other parts of the catchment. And I think re-meandering the river, re-wiggling and changing the way that the land works is something that will benefit communities other than Leeds, but it will have that benefit if we do enough of it in the right places as well. On the sort of more surface water or urban sort of management, you could say that's urban natural flood management as well. I think the Meanwood scheme is our sort of leading example at the moment of where we would be looking at rain gardens and doing different things. It's in its early stages. It would fit well actually with the topic for next year, Councillor Bithell, but we have created an internal group and involved Yorkshire Water in a group that looks at blue-green infrastructure development and trying to get past some of those barriers around how difficult it is to get around services, how difficult it is to work within, the adopted highway and everything that comes with that in terms of safety and the management of a live highway. We did get a bit stuck on this topic when we met recently, but tree pits are a thing in that, in terms of the design of it, whether it's a structure, formal structure, or whether it can be a little bit more informal. We've obviously got, like all the country has, challenges around ash dieback, and there's a challenge there, but there's also an opportunity around how do we help the city to recover from a sort of woodland creation in urban areas. We're an active member of the Green Streets and White Rose Forest initiative around how we do that. So we are actively putting a lot of work into that in terms of how do we sort of unlock some of those opportunities, because it is challenging to bring green infrastructure and blue infrastructure into the city, but we think there are some good examples in other parts of the country that we can learn from. There are some good examples within Leeds. I don't think we sometimes say enough about those examples, and I think we need to do more around making sure that maintenance is factored in and the way we manage it. You could equally use a model like a resilience company in an urban setting around how do we maintain that, how do people acknowledge the benefits that they get from their local infrastructure. And then I think to sort of look at how we work with planning in that respect, I think we haven't seen the implementation of what they call Schedule 3 of the Flood and Water Management Act, which is specific to SUDS and sustainable urban drainage. I think, but the government has released guidance on SUDS specifically last year. We are working with planning to implement that within planning policy now. So we didn't get a lot of warning on that, but we welcomed it. We think it's good. It just needs to be implemented and integrated within our planning policy documents. So we're on with that process at the moment. And I think in terms of, the opinion, public opinion in particular, isn't helped by a lot of flood incidents that we see that involve recent developments and new development. But the challenge there is the fact that actually new development is usually extremely helpful in managing surface water risk in particular, because you can have a lot of historic sites that won't have any surface water drainage infrastructure, or sites that are brownfield sites and therefore they're not managed and operated. Whereas a new development, if properly designed, properly implemented and looked after, actually that can see a huge improvement in the way that surface water is managed from that site. It's just not what people see, and I think that's the challenge that we've got, is that unfortunately lots of incidents do happen, and that nearly always comes from lack of management. Or a lack of sort of implementation in the end of the actual technical solution. So I think planning colleagues, and certainly my team that look after the development control side of things on flood risk, that technical solution's right. It's the way it's implemented and the way it's managed that seems to undermine it. But new development can offer really positive opportunities around surface water management.
Thanks, that's really useful information. The other thing I forgot to mention on surface water was the concreting over and tarmacking of gardens, and I've actually visibly seen that, like in 2024, the kind of extra effect that had in terms of just like a river of water coming down the road, and that particularly affects slopes, which there are lots of in Leeds. Is there anything more we can do? I don't know whether that's working with planning or whether there's more we can do in terms of comms and talking to residents of Leeds about encouraging doing that less, the tarmacking and concreting over of gardens.
It is a problem. I think people by and large don't realise that you actually need consent from the local authority to pave over or create create areas within your front garden in particular that are impermeable. People just do it. And then in terms of having the resources to be able to go around and say, did you realise you shouldn't have done that? That's really challenging. I think a more proactive way to do that would be to try and engage communities in. There's a knock-on effect. If 50% of the people in a locality decide to do that, that's quite a big cumulative impact. And whereas actually just using a different material, a different design, they could still park on that space, but it could still have the sort of infiltration characteristics that a grass area would have. I think there's some work for us collectively to do. I think the project that Mark mentioned earlier in Garforth around adaptation pathways, a really positive move in a place like that would be actually there's this very specific thing we have to do in places like Garforth that have got the really complicated surface water systems. Actually, maybe we do need to, almost need community guardians and people that go around and notice these things. People know their own communities really well, and I think there's a role there for us to play collectively in society in terms of making the link. Can we do more to educate everybody? But in terms of the next generation of people coming into our industry as well, and the next homeowners, can we make sure that they realise that there's that link? We've been doing some work as part of ARC actually with some of the schools in the city, and I know part of Leeds Climate Commission with Councillor Dye, and I think there's some work there to work with schools about that sort of the role that people can play. I also think as well that we could do a lot more in terms of just highlighting what's possible and how easy it is, but we maybe need to show people that. So one of the projects that we've got in Meanwood is to work with the farm, and we think there's a real good opportunity to demonstrate what's possible around blue-green infrastructure and get that sort of visible to people. There's a lot of interest from other partners in West Yorkshire about that, about having a place where you can come and touch and feel it, and you can have an explanation around it, or you can play around with how does that part of our car park drain compared to that part of our car park, and you can literally see it practically in front of your eyes. I think that could be a great opportunity to engage people in the difference. I think it's easier for people to see it. How many hundreds of people to take their young children to the farm and then see that thing, probably better than a poster or a briefing note on our website. Maybe something that's more practical would be better.
That was my year 7 infiltration field work, was going around the school and doing exactly that. Just pouring water on random surfaces. I mean, there was more to it than that, of course, but not much. I was really interested there around the looking at talking to homeowners. I wonder whether there is something around also talking to businesses and tradies. Like I had my garden, it's a bit strong. I was going to say re-landscaped. It's probably 3 meters by 3 meters. Wasn't much of a landscape, but my builder, I explained what I wanted. And he was like, oh, I thought you were going to ask for that stupid plastic grass. And I was like, absolutely not. But he was like, I would have refused to do it. And actually getting tradesfolk on board in the process and saying, actually, when you have that conversation with the homeowner, is it that an appropriate time to raise the issues? Because I think a lot of people trust their tradespeople. And actually, we talk all the time, don't we, about using community organisations as trusted partners. And actually, perhaps that is a trusted partner for this style of work. Okay. My questions. I think it's really excellent that we got to the 225k mark. There were some concerns last time that was kind of one of the pinch points of, are we going to make it? So for it to come back this year and that be the case, I think is brilliant. On point 11, it talks about on the final, I think the final bullet point, final bullet point, talks about recruitment and retention of skilled technical staff. And I guess my question is, how are we solving that? That's another part of our remit, is around employment and skills. And one of the things that keeps coming up is how we make sure that the green industry is, the training is happening in our city and people are encouraged to work within a green industry. But actually, that retention element, when we are a public sector body, is challenging in terms of we haven't got the bells and whistles of packages that perhaps some of the more corporate organisations have. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about how we're challenging that and whether there's anything we can do as a scrutiny board around it. On point 14, bullet point 7, it talks about the reliability of public transport being a KPI. And I guess my concern is that that particular KPI is really reliant on external stakeholders. Is that likely to sway our results for whether we've been successful moving forward? Thank you for including the teams. I thought it was really important that we got a bit of a detailed look at that. When we move on to point 3.3.3, when they came to Chair's brief, I was like, your numbering system's well off. And then they've improved it to this. So imagine what it was like before. At least now it's numerical. I wonder if there's a recommendation around the BNG stuff, because that's kind of been a bit of a sticking point over the past couple of years as well, of who's doing it and what are they each doing. And whilst there is a lot more clarity now, I think there probably is more that can be done to make sure that's really clear. And then linked to that is a question around why we're not seeing that many river units coming forward, bearing in mind how many rivers we've got in rivers and tributaries and such like in Leeds. I would have expected us to now be getting quite a lot of BNG stuff coming through, and that isn't the case necessarily. And then this is on 3.4.9. This is not me advocating for it, but I wondered what the process would be. It talks about not having adequate flood storage sites. Do we ever look for flooding at compulsory purchase in order to make sure we do get the sites that we need to protect for the wider good? And then this is really just a little opportunity for Jonathan, really. I wondered if you wanted to talk about rubble sacks, because when we spoke, I was completely unaware, as many others might well be, that sandbags are not seen as prime things. So if you're looking to engage with flood protection, Jonathan can give you some information on rubble sacks and why they're a better option, because I thought that was super interesting, and that's how I'd like us to end the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the question on grants and compulsory purchase, and Jonathan will take the others if that's okay. So in terms of salaries and such like, it's difficult for us from a technical staff point of view to compete with, let's say, some other organisations. Given we don't have too much influence over that, we are looking at other ways of recruiting and retaining staff. One of those is offering on-the-job training. So we actually train more junior members of staff up to be more senior. They understand the organisation. They receive the same qualifications, and they're invested in the organisation. The other thing we're doing is emphasising, if we can call them the softer benefits, whether it's the kind of flexibility of working or the pension, the salary sacrifice scheme on cars and such like. So we're kind of changing how we kind of approach recruitment. So we still expect the traditional people to apply to a degree, but we are putting a greater emphasis on, well, how else can we do this? How else can we advertise the positions? Obviously, with social media and such like, it's no longer just appropriate to put the council the role on the council website and leave it as that. So we are doing everything we can, and we have seen some improvement, but there's further improvement that we need to do in order to make sure we get a full structure within the department and of course on that duty structure. For the question about compulsory purchase, so on Meanwood Beck specifically, we didn't need to consider this as an option because the most viable options were actually on council land. I double checked this point after Chair's brief. However, if we did need to go down that route, whether it was on this scheme in particular or other ones, we would consider it, but there's other things to consider at the same time. For example, on Leeds Fast 2, we devolved Water Resources Act powers from the Environment Agency. So we could go onto other people's land to build, for example, a flood storage area without having to be the owner of that land. And we tend to find that is a far more straightforward way of achieving what we need to achieve. The advice I've received from our legal team in the past is compulsory purchase is a big job and can take many years. And obviously, when we're trying to reduce flood risk to communities as fast as possible, that's not something that's too palatable.
I think the objective previously in the strategy, I think we'll bring forward a slightly different option around the reliability of public transport, but I think reflecting the fact that there's lots of other factors at play there in terms of there's lots of outside factors around how successful we can be around influencing that in terms of reliability. I think what does fit very well though going forward with the sort of sustainable, resilient city element is the risk to infrastructure and the risk to the way that the city operates from climate risks, particularly flooding. So lots of the highway network is unfortunately at risk of flooding, and increasingly so because of climate change. The floods you mentioned, Councillor Goodall, in 2024, the lots of infrastructure around the city was heavily affected, and that's quite complicated. You know, you've got underground infrastructure that then affects the highway network. You've got overground flows that can then cause delays and impacts. So I think that's something we're quite keen to look at. So whether or not we would, I suppose, directly influence the reliability of public transport, it might be more about going forward, we would look at how we would affect the sustainability and reliability of the network, and by looking at the resilience of the network. How resilient is it to climate risks, both heat and flood and drought and things like this? All these things affect the network. So I think that's the sort of shift that you might see in the version that comes forward, because I think we did recognise that that felt like a suitable objective in the previous strategy, but maybe we need to just move with that and adjust that going forward. On biodiversity net gain, we have been surprised that there isn't the demand that we thought there would be for watercourse units yet. There are a lot of operators nationally, though, that that offer solutions that are maybe meaning that what we do see is they can offset their requirements through planning by doing that elsewhere. And I think the private sector has probably mobilised very quickly to capitalise on that, and they're working with developers across multiple sites, multiple cities, and offering them a solution en masse, maybe in terms of developing both terrestrial and watercourse units. What we have done since we last came here is we've put time and energy, picking up on what Mark's just said around giving skills and expertise to staff within the team about watercourse units. So we've now got somebody who's fully qualified to do the assessments around watercourse units. They are working very closely with colleagues in green spaces that do the terrestrial side of things. I think we're a lot more prepared for managing units that come forward that we would do through the Habitat company, and working with colleagues in planning and green spaces around how we do the legal side of it, how we do so that it's a joined up offer. What we would really like to see is and we're getting to that point now, we've a number of sites that we've pre-assessed that we will have ready fairly well. There's some sites are ready already that would be ready as units banked, so that therefore what we wouldn't do is see piecemeal reactive responses to planning applications coming in. Both our own projects within the council that require planning and therefore require BNG units, and private developers coming forward, we'd have a more strategic approach. So we could take a sort of mini catchment approach. So we'd see biodiversity improvement in a more coordinated way from, say, top to bottom of a smaller catchment in the city, particularly where we've got ownership. So there is we've sort of taken a more spatial mapping approach to that and said, where have we got ownership? Where have we got connectivity that manages along watercourses? Could we make a tangible difference to that watercourse rather than a little bit of habitat improvement there and some over there? So we think we can bring forward a more coordinated approach on that. So we're definitely in a better position than we were last year. I think we're in a good position going forward, but we're not necessarily seeing the demand yet. And I don't know if that's because people are avoiding the need to have to do it, or whether they're just doing it through offsetting it by doing it elsewhere. Ideally, we want to see that benefit in the city, don't we? We want to see the biodiversity improved in Leeds. And then the final point, then I think, unless I've missed one, was rubble sacks. It's not as exciting as it sounds, I don't think, but it's good. I have said this many times when I've come here. I know Mark mentioned sandbags earlier. They are really popular still. People really do take a lot of comfort from having sandbags delivered, and we understand that. We think that people, that's part of whether they work or they don't, they feel better for having sandbags on their property or available. Our sandbag policy as a council is that we wouldn't provide sandbags to individuals. We do support organised flood groups, and we do protect infrastructure that serves a lot of people. And sandbags do provide some level of protection. They're not waterproof. Sand just allows water to infiltrate through it, so that by its very virtue, unless you cover it in plastic, it's not that effective. What it does do sometimes is buy a bit of time, or it does divert water quite effectively. But yeah, the simple thing that we have found, and we worked with Resilience and Emergencies colleagues, so the Resilience and Emergencies team, we work with them quite closely. We did do some work a couple of years ago with West Yorkshire Fire and Rescue, and they did a little video that showed what you can do with just a roll of standard supermarket plastic rubble sacks, or heavy duty bin bags, and some tape or cable ties, or you just tie them off. If you fill them with water, they stack really well. So you can actually build a really effective alternative to a sandbag wall with a roll of plastic bags that you could have under your kitchen sink or in your shed, and it takes up a lot less room, but they're really effective. One of the things with sandbags at the end is if they've been contaminated by dirty water, which obviously flood water nearly always is mixed with other water, the sandbag that's left behind is actually hazardous waste, potentially, or it's certainly waste that you would need to make sure it's disposed of properly. Or they're just difficult to get rid of because they're difficult to take somewhere, they're very heavy. Whereas actually, the water that you've filled that rubble sack with is clean, and therefore you could just empty the bag in an appropriate way, and it's dead easy, and what you need to get rid of is very simple. So we do feel we maybe could try and find that video that we did before, do some work with them, but they are really good, as rubble sacks are a very useful thing to do instead of sandbags.
Thank you. And councillors were giving me the eye of how interesting that was. I think you underestimate how interesting that sort of niche information, because the thing is, when something like that happens or is looking like it's going to happen, it's us that get those calls from, well, we always use this Mrs. Miggins, don't we? It's us that get the call from Mrs. Miggins, and actually, nip round the corner shop and grab some heavy duty bin bags and fill them with water is actually a really useful piece of information for us to be able to give out. So I'm delighted that we ended on that note. So in terms of recommendations, the recommendations for this Evade Me are to review the implementation of the strategy and provide comments to help inform its future development. Current LFRMS is due to be updated in September 2026. I think we've achieved that today. We would like to note the anticipated engagement with the refreshed local flood risk management strategy in June 2026, and to reflect that next year's annual update focuses on the risks of surface water flooding / flash flooding. And my suggestion is we add to that green-blue infrastructure, because that's come out as well today quite strongly. And then also to request more clarity next year on BNG assessments and the numbers of applications coming through. That doesn't need to be part of that focused thing, if it can just be a paragraph on the end or whatever, just so that we've got that information coming to us. That would be helpful. Is everyone content with those recommendations? Beautiful. In which case, thank you very much for coming. And unless you've got any final things you'd all like to say, I'll close the item. No? Okay, great. I'll close that item then. Thank you. We'll move on to the final item, which is actually the 7th item, the work programme. Hold on. I've forgotten to do something important because it was under a fold in the paper. Year-end statement. So Becky would like me to officially get approval of the year-end statement, which is the one with our faces on it. Are you all happy that we are good for that to be published? Yeah, getting plenty of okays and nods. So we have official approval. Don't pipe down because I will mess it up. So we'll go back to number 7. For context for the webcast and our millions of fans, the work schedule is currently in a really strongly draft set up, because we're doing one-to-ones as board members with me, so that I can then pull together key themes that people have identified in order to get a work programme that's ready for the next scrutiny board to take up or to tear apart. That's their prerogative in the new municipal year. Do members at this stage have any further comments on what they'd like included? Sonia?
Apologies. I know we've got a section on third-party works on the highway to include utility companies, which is great. And I know as part of performance monitoring, the highways is discussed, but it is a very hot topic at the moment, and there's a lot of conversation around trialing new technology to improve fixing potholes and improving the roads. I feel it's a bit like vaporware at the moment. I just feel like we should dig into that a little bit more. Just can't get hold of it. I can't get hold of it. I don't know if it's possible for us to just dig into it a little bit more and just see if we can really find out whether the trials that they've run have been successful, what's going to happen next, really getting them to commit some dates moving forward. Some things I'm sure our residents would be very happy about.
Yeah, I see no reason we can't. What that will probably mean is we'll need to do it on a different day, because I don't think along with the other two we'd be able to go that deep into it. But I have been out playing with the potholing stuff, and I can't tell you how exciting it is. There's also been a lot of stuff on social media around, oh, you're going to take on these machines and then everyone's going to lose their jobs. It's just not a thing, because you need people to operate them. And whilst they do different bits of it, they don't do none of them do the full pothole fix. But yeah, watching a road be superheated to like 240 degrees and then the tarmac just basically turns to rice has been brilliant. I mean, not white rice, it's obviously still tarmac coloured. That's irrelevant. But yes, we definitely could have that come in. And I think what I would advocate for, having seen several of them in action, is that actually they each are really effective at their own specific style. And if we're bringing up that coordination around utility companies, it would fit in really well to be like, okay, well, this section of road needs this utility work done, but it also has these potholes, which would be useful for that particular style of pothole fix. And actually getting that sort of database, especially with the potential to use AI, which is part of what we're doing already with checking roads, I think would be amazing. Whether we make that well, actually, based on this, we could just make it a lecture from me. That would be fun in and of itself. But what we could do is potentially do that as a workshop before the then.
If there's enough in the performance report, I think it's fine. But I think it's a big ticket item. It is, isn't it? And it's not just the potholes, like you say. Actually, the improvement work to identify the potholes in the first place, and some other stuff they mentioned that I can't remember. Yeah.
And we're now in a situation where, not to get too political, as I know that's not the thing, but we're now in a situation where there is money coming from above to be able to make some real difference. And we don't want to miss the opportunity to scrutinise that. So I think that's a really fair and reasonable point for us to amend. Thank you. And to be fair, spoiler alert, also links into some people's one-to-ones. So good work, everyone. Anything else from anyone else? No, nobody wants any other lectures from me? No, okay. In which case, this is, I believe, the last meeting of the municipal year. And unless there's a call in, yeah. And that means that I will not necessarily be chair next year, and you guys will not necessarily be on the board next year. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for your work this year. We really have cracked through an awful lot and genuinely made a difference to the services in Leeds, which not every scrutiny board across the country can say. So I am really grateful for the effort that you guys have put in over and above what the public sees on public meetings, and for supporting me so effectively during the year. And hopefully I will see you all in meetings after May. We'll see. All right. Thank you.